call this to order. We need to do a quorum.
Declare quorum.
Okay, we have quorum, so we're starting. I'm going to start with a quick leadership report, and Marcus said the Vice President, you may want to have some as well, and then we'll go straight into the Director's report and the set of issues we have. The one thing I want to say to begin with on the leadership report is what a great day this was, that we had the DC Council had a roundtable on teacher retention. Our chairman, Fraser O'Leary, the chairman of our teacher retention committee, spoke, represented the board on a panel with the state superintendent and the superintendent of DC Public Schools. And I just want to say, our chancellor and our state superintendent, and I just wanted to say, really to this board, to the board that preceded this board, to the leadership of the board that preceded this board, to the staff, it is really a testament to all of us that we got this issue on the agenda of the city, because for sure the city did not want to deal with this, and we heard about it, and we heard about it, and we heard about it. And we've managed to bring it to center stage, and it's really great. I think it speaks to what this board is capable of doing when we recognize an issue and we can bring it before the city in this way. So thanks to everybody. So with that, because I'm going to leave my voice, we will move to the executive director's report. And at the end of the meeting, if we can, I want to come back and talk about some other meeting issues coming up, some topics. But I don't want to do it right now. Let's see my voice.
Could we ask questions of leadership?
Yes.
At this time, is that appropriate? I wonder, the state board has statutory and voluntary seats on several organizations, like the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, like Raise DC, like Every Day Counts. I wonder if you could, historically, we've gotten updates from leadership on, or rank and file members who attended those meetings, and we haven't received that recently. I wonder if y'all could update us on all of those commissions and PACs and whatnot on which you sit on behalf of the board, and what's going on with them.
Sure. The one that I sit on is Raise DC. I'll turn it over
She'll be right back.
to Ashley for a report on the attendant on the truancy task force.
Yes.
Jack just asked if we could each give a quick report on the boards that we sit on behalf of the board.
Me? No?
Well, I mean, if you want to raise DC first, we'll catch it.
Okay. Yeah. So what I can say about Raise DC is actually it's gone through a big leadership change, and the reality is it's in the process of shifting its leadership, and that's really what the last couple of meetings have been about. So don't actually have a lot to say about that.
Is that an acronym?
No, it's a consortium, collaborative coalition of a lot of different organizations in the city that are involved in education, and they've been coming together for a while.
But it's
RAISE,
Raise.
yeah, and it tries to bring together all of its members on behalf of goals related to to children.
We've heard of the Strive Collaborative in Cincinnati. It's a collective impact organization trying to work to lifetime connections. I'll send it. It's pretty interesting stuff.
So I don't know about the military.
The military compact one, we never get updates for, or when their meetings are. We do have a seat on that one. I can get more information.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that our voices actually at all these things it used to be, and it isn't, and I think that's a missed opportunity for us. And then Washington Area Boards of Education, I think we've got 2 seats there. Has anyone been attending those meetings?
I think we continue to have, as we did under you, the problem that it's on the same day as our meetings.
Yeah, the Wade meetings are also because they also shifted leadership. They took us off the list at one point. And we've been, I think, back before you were president, maybe we weren't always invited to Wade meetings because
We weren't at all until I was president. That's
Yeah.
one thing that I wanted to make sure that we were doing was collaborating with our colleagues around the region.
Right. And when the leadership of those organizations changed, they also shifted whether or not we were invited to them. We have reached out a couple times to make sure that we're on the list, and I haven't seen any emails come from them, but I can check everything for that and on the military compact.
And then if we just could get a list of all of those where we have seats and
Sure.
who's serving in their capacity and making sure that we can share that
We can do
information
that.
with the
We can
full
put-
board
we
and
can
with the
put notes.
folks that watch online and with our constituents. I think that's helpful. I think Zachary has a pretty good newsletter. Things like that would be really helpful to put in there to show that we're doing more than just talking to ourselves.
We can do that, and we can also put it on the agenda along with committees.
Sure.
Just for updates from.
Anything going on with truancy?
No, the last meeting, Everyday Counts meeting was, November 19th. I'm not prepared to talk about it, but just a few points. We talked about different resources, schools making sure they have the adequate resources, and they're continuing to track data metrics, trying to find out who is meeting attendance goals, etc. And more than welcome to share the notes from the last meeting with the entire board if you have any questions.
And then Everyday Counts used to have like an executive committee that had the president of the state board, the chairman of the education committee, Mr. Mendelson, deputy mayor, and then it had the larger group.
Yes, and
So-
Karen used to go to that meeting beforehand. I don't know, I've not been invited to that meeting since then. I know
Are
you
we
went
invited to
the
the executive
first.
committee and what's the update on?
Yes.
Everyday Counts.
I believe Ruth is on those emails for the executive meeting. I get the ones for the data meetings. Unfortunately, they're often during other times that I can't be there, but
Yeah, I get the data committee updates. But yeah,
And I think Ashley's been sharing those around too when you get them. We get those reports quarterly, so.
if anybody wants, actually the newest quarterly report just came out this week. If you're interested in the data, I'm more than happy to share
I
it.
think it'd be great to just share that with everybody. And with the executive committee.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that at all, Jeff.
Okay.
So
I'll make sure that it changes then.
So I'd suggest we do that for all of these to make sure that we're represented and that there are substitutes if someone can't make it. Because that executive committee is great FaceTime with the other educational leaders in the city. And if we're missing that, we're missing the opportunity to share our voice.
And they're all as community schools met yet? Are
They have, and I'm happy to talk about that too, yes. So the Community Schools Advisory Board, which I sit on as the state board's rep, has unofficially met once. We were not able to meet quorum, so we weren't able to conduct any business. We are going to be having a second a meeting on December 18th, which is the day of our public meeting. So I'll have a meeting before that to discuss our bylaws and sort of decide where to go in the future. They did award the OSSI did award 2 grants for the truancy directed funding through the grant program this year. And I cannot remember them off the top of my head, but I will get those names of all the community schools. One of the things that I've asked for OSSI to do is to provide us with a list of all community schools, whether they get the OSSI grant program or not. And then they don't know this yet, but I'm going to ask Caitlin from the staff and Sarah, who is our fellow, to create a sort of GIS map so that we can actually have it mapped of all the community schools and then sorted by ward and then link also then to like DC report card and that information as well. We did, Ruth and I, and I think some of the other members too, went to some of the community school visits back in September, which are really great things. They do them every year and they're really, really interesting. Just to learn about what the different needs of each individual school are. I was really excited this year. I got to go to a number of schools I've never been to before, like Seed. It has a community school, which was a really interesting new program that their new principal is pushing pretty hard. And then another school that I'm trying to remember, Burville? Was that Burville Elementary, which has a really fantastic program. And I think think some of the focus that they put on reading in the past year was evident in their STAR rating as well. They jumped two points in their STAR rating this year, and I think a lot of it has to do with the principals both focus on reading interventions through the community school model and making sure that it's the right fit for.
Is the community? Garnet Patterson was a community school,
And Cardozo is as well.
and they it was fabulous. I mean, to go into that as a brand new teacher, which is wonderful. But do they have? Is it from like 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock?
It depends on the school. The community schools program or idea really, they start out with doing a needs assessment of the student body, the families, the teachers, and the leadership of the school, and then combining all of that information and looking to see what are the primary needs of this community as a school building, and then trying to figure out what partnerships can meet those needs. So whether that's medical needs, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's access to food, whether it's reading interventions, whether it's after school programming, what are the needs of that particular community, and so it's an interesting model, I think, to use in the types of schools that we have, which are each school building, even if they're just a couple blocks apart, are different, and you really need to focus on what the communities are. Some of them provide laundry services within the school building.
Can we get the panel?
Sure.
Yeah. The one that John Paul and I went to, MedStar was a partner, and came there on a regular basis to provide medical services on the spot. And they really were able to talk about actually very serious things that they have been able to identify early on. It was really terrific.
And when I went to Washington, Tennessee, is actually their partner, community partner, and they provide a lot of services to the community.
We need to get the word out.
Yeah.
A couple of years back, we took a group of folks up to Baltimore to see their community school network, and they run close to 60, maybe over 60 community schools citywide, and it's supported through, I guess, a semi-governmental but really nonprofit entity that both disperses the money and also helps with technical support too. And so maybe even inviting somebody down from like the family league of Baltimore to
Sure.
talk about their work.
Yeah, the committee itself is an advisory body to OSSI, and OSSI has the Community School Incentive Initiative, so that it's a seed money to start community schools throughout the district. And it's been operating for quite a while. Cardozo was actually one of the original.
When was that?
So LAYC was the original sponsor at Cardozo.
Okay. I never
They
started.
So yes.
Because we had maybe 10 years ago, we had just so many things going on, AmeriCorps, and this and that, and all these partnerships with colleges, everything like that.
One of the great things about community schools is that it gets the government out of what the problems are with the local community, and gets a nonprofit working in the community to identify what those problems are with that individual school and how we can best help that individual school population.
That was one of the conversations today at the hearing about DC schools not being a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And this is, that's we need to.
And ECPS is Connected School Program. It's pretty much a community school model by another name. I mean, they're making the investments to make sure that there's a full-time connected school coordinator, which is the same as a full-time community school coordinator, and for partnerships and giving that extra funding so that the school can meet those additional needs. So
How do schools get that designation?
This year,
but I think the
That's not
ECPS
the thing.
No,
So it's two different sets of schools, right?
Yasi grant they applied for.
Right, DCPS, I think, did not give to any schools above one star, though, I think, was their distinction.
I think that's probably right. And DCBS designated the schools rather than
Right.
having them apply for it. But
So, for instance, both Anacostia and Blue River are connected schools now.
and the OSSI grant
is an open grant.
it is an open grant. It's a 3-year grant cycle. So there were nobody rolling off the grant this year, but I think there's about 20 schools total that are getting funding in this 3-year cycle of grants, and I can provide more information about the grants. The committee itself has also talked with the superintendent was able to top in our last unofficial meeting and talk about sort of the goals for the group. There have been requests in the past for this grant program to really become the inception initiative, which is what it's supposed to be, to start the seed, and then include in the budget some funding to continue the grant through other means. Part of the grant itself is designed to, like I said, prime the pump for these types of organizations, and then part of it is also designing sustainability for this program to continue to exist after the end of the grant cycle. But there is no funding right now available, at least through the city government, for that type of programming. And what the committee had talked about in previous years was to request that a new grant program be provided to fund the salary of the community schools manager at each school that has gone through the initiation grant gone through the full 3-year cycle, because it's challenging to raise funds for salaries. And so if the government can provide that salary, which is generally around $75,000 a year, then that doesn't have to come from the school budget. It doesn't have to come from anywhere else. It really helps them be able to have that stability to then raise dollars or partnerships to continue the programming going on. So,
To that point about stability, one of the schools I visited in Ward 6, the community schools coordinator has more longevity than any of the previous school leaders, because there have been 3 different principals in 3 years, but the community schools coordinator has been a constant. But she is employed by the outside partner organization that is partnering with them.
right.
And so each time they got new leadership, she, got to or had to do the work of relating to the new school leader and reminding them that the needs assessment that was completed still represented the students and families in the school and didn't need to be sort of done again. But it's an interesting argument because for having that sort of stability that follows the families and the students and helps in some ways bring on new leadership, making sure that they're aware of the needs of the school. And she was really a beloved figure in the building. You could tell the number of hugs that were given.
One other thing I'll say on this is there have been efforts over the years to try to push extra money into this during budget time, and they have not gone farther than they've gone. And it might be something to look at. And one of the things when we talk about what topics we want to look at next year, I think it would be nice for us to do a related to your briefing to really look at the budget maybe in January or February and have some real conversations about what's being funded, what's not being funded. Not so much for our board to say or do something about, but we're all active in our own communities, and it would just put us in such a better position to understand that and be able to be part of those discussions and bring those discussions to the
Might also be good for us to get it before we have the meeting, so we can see what we're talking about, rather than have it at the meeting and we have to start figuring it out.
to have the
If we can get the paperwork on the budget before we talk about it.
well then we're waiting, then we'll be, by the time the paperwork comes from the council, we'll be deep into the budget period, doesn't it? But we can talk about how to do it in the way.
No, like you're saying, we don't have any power to do anything about the budget, but we do have a power to talk about the budget with our constituents. I'm just saying, if we could see sort of what they're looking at, what DCPS is looking at the budgets, because the charters are individual budgets, right?
Yeah, well, we can do that as much as we can. We can,
Because the budget cycle is in February.
Well, the budget doesn't come out until March. The mayor's budget will be released in I think early March or mid-March. Last year was March 22nd.
But the schools, what are the schools doing?
The school budgets are included in the mayor's budget, but generally they're not allowed to release that information to anybody until the mayor's budget is released.
so, but we'll figure out how we can get as much up front so that we can have some context and then sort of think about what are going to be the big issues. What happens. February for that.
Okay.
And any updates on like DME, chancellor, superintendent meeting?
No, I think at the last meeting, if I believe Marcus and I reported on our conversation with the chairman and talked about, where we talked a lot about the teacher retention issue, and it looks like they're going to have some hearings on teacher retention for the yeah. All right. Do you want anything to report? Paul? Executive director report? Or should we go straight to the?
Well, we need to talk about the ceremony resolution discussion. Is that you?
Okay.
That makes okay. So members, in your folders there is a sheet that says from DC Council rules. Ashley had provided some of this information previously, and I thought it'd be helpful for us all to keep it in one place. The top section and the first sort of paragraph where it has the definition of ceremonial resolution are about ceremonial resolutions, which are defined as being an honorarium, a token of appreciation, that type of thing. The council also uses a resolution that they call a sense of the council, which it seems, which we have talked about many times in the past with other leadership, and I have been very hesitant to do, and now I'm thinking that it might be a good thing to do. So I've changed my mind, believe it or not, on something. I know, it happens, it's crazy.
I'm marking down the date.
That's probably smart, because it probably won't happen again for a while.
Who gets the sanctity for working a miracle?
Well, I mean, I think Jackie and Karen did a really great job of pushing me towards this direction in their leadership, and now the rest of the board has continued to push through this. So the idea is that this body does have or should have like the ability to express itself on a sense of the body on a policy issue, and we don't have the ability in our current bylaws to do that, other than by ceremonial resolution, which, as Ashley rightly pointed out, is supposed to be an honorarium or a token of appreciation. It's not the same thing. So my suggestion would be that the board sort of direct me to write some language for the bylaws that we can consider in January as an update to provide this type of resolution as something that we do for the future.
Discussion. My question is, how is that then different, say, so we have this birth to 3 resolution?
So for instance, the birth to 3 resolution and the anti-smoking, anti-vaping resolution would fit very well within the sense of the state board type resolution. It provides information about why we think that this is the way that it should be, and provides a sense that this board believes this is true. But it's different than our state board resolutions because we don't have authority over these things. We're making recommendations on policy issues. And so that would be the difference.
My concern with this is that we are not a policy-making board. We are not a legislative board. We are not an activist organization. We're not a school board. We are the State Board of Education. That is a policy approval board on certain limited policies. When you look around the country, no other State Board of Education is doing big tobacco resolutions or obesity resolutions or stuff like that. They are working on stuff like our attendance, our teacher turnover, meaty subjects, curriculum. And I believe that by doing this, it fills up our time when we can be using that time more appropriately to be working on issues that we actually have authority over and can actually make a difference on. CTE. We've talked about lots of other issues throughout we have a whole list of issues that we can be talking about, that we can be making recommendations on and resolutions on. And these types of resolutions, I think, distract from the actual work that our board can do.
Wow.
because we have no authority over it.
Where's the distraction?
It's taking time, well, this conversation right now is taking time away when we can be talking about an issue that we actually work on. One of the many host of issues that many of these board members have wanted to talk about for years. Zachary, I know, put forth, when we had that list of, I probably have it in my thing, our list of issues to talk about. We had 7, 8 members talking about different issues. We can only talk about a few issues at a time. This would give us bandwidth to talk about more issues. At least talk about the issues that we have authority over. Instead of going after issues that we're talking about it right now when we could be talking about something else. Our endorsement or resolution on this means absolutely nothing. It is the council that works on this issue. We have no authority over it. We are more than welcome to do this on our own time or with a letter out of board working time periods. Okay, but this takes away from doing these other issues, takes away from the work that we actually can be doing.
Can I have a clarifying question? Clarifying question, I have a clarifying question, then we'll sort of organize that.
Are there any examples that anyone is aware of what a sense of the council resolution that the council has passed includes?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the council just this week passed a sense of the council related to the Armenian genocide, and the actionable, so the therefore clause actually required the council staff to send a copy to us as one of the people that was interested because of the work on social studies and that
Okay.
sort of thing. So there are
a sense of the board resolution might be have an actionable step, but what it might be is then to send a letter to the council or to the DC Public Schools or to the Public Charter School Board.
Yeah.
So we would want to keep them within the scope of people to whom we could conceivably write a letter who could do something about something.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the other things that we just talked about in community schools, for instance, that could be something that a sense of the state board might be used for. It's the sense of the state board that additional funding is needed for community schools and urges the council to do so. I mean, that's something that is conceivable that would fit, I think, some of what Ashley is talking about, in that it's related to our work, but also we don't have actionable authority over it. So I think there could be a potential mix.
That's helpful, thank you.
My clarifying question is just, as you were talking, Ashley, are you indicating that are you making a distinction between, say, the big tobacco resolution and the working through resolution in terms of?
I'm talking about, so what I'm talking about, it could be a myriad of different policy issues, okay? We could say anything's for the kids, and anything can now be a policy issue that we talk about, and we get a sense, and then that goes on to what do we talk about, what do we not talk about? Why can we not just put together a letter, which actually 2 years ago, Marcus and I and several members of the board put together a letter of the majority of the board and sent it to the council on an issue that we felt strongly about. We can still remember some of
Just curious.
I literally had 3 hours of sleep last night, guys. My son is teething, so
No
but
excuses.
if
Anytime on
Great. Says Father Fiber.
We never use it. I've had children since 1970.
but what I'm saying is it's not that we can't do that. What I'm saying is why do we have to do it at working sessions and at board meetings? Why can't we continue, if you want to put together a letter and send it to the council on big tobacco, those members who want to join in on that issue can do so. But it's not it's not an issue that we have authority over or that affects the work that we do.
I think connected to that, one follow-up question is, I just want to make sure I'm clear, are there resolutions that you are in favor of versus others? Or are you saying we shouldn't do resolutions as a board at all?
What do you mean? Like sense of the council resolution?
is your argument that we shouldn't do anything outside of a ceremonial resolution where we're honoring a school leader, for instance?
Or state board resolutions where we do have resolutions on what them do.
Got it.
obviously.
Okay.
You know,
Wait. Because I'm gonna, like, to me, vaping is dangerous to our students. Very dangerous to our students.
But that's not the issue. The overarching issue is whether or not it's dangerous. This resolution in and of itself is providing a policy prescription and an endorsement of a piece of legislation that we have no authority over. You can take that same issue and put it on to, say, banning soda, or, I don't know, changing the color of the building to green. Random examples, okay? It could be anything.
I don't see no relationship.
I think what she's arguing is
Obesity is bad.
you could try to make the connection to anything that it impacts
Right.
outside of the realm of what is in our purview as a state board.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is this is potentially a slippery slope that could use up a lot of staff and board member time on issues that we can't control. Should we do a sense of the board on climate change legislation, what the council should be putting towards it? Should we do a resolution on a sense of the state board on, I don't know, again, it could be anything on whether or not the president should be impeached.
Right.
At what point do you say, this is something that we should work on, and something we shouldn't work on?
Yeah.
Which
And I
I
think
which I
that's-
actually think is a fair argument. I think that's a fair argument. I would just say similar to I think our ANC counterparts. I think we should not underestimate the power of our influence as a board and the fact that we were elected to represent sections of the city in terms of education matters. I do hear the point of when we're skirting on the edges of what is actually in the wheelhouse of the board's work in terms of education, which I would concede that maybe tobacco use and vaping is probably not central to what we're normally talking about. But it would make me nervous for us to take a stance that we as a board would never issue a resolution on matters that we didn't necessarily have authority.
I have one thought on this, but I don't have a proposal. I don't know if there's something the staff could come up with on this. I mean, I'm sympathetic, and we talked about this about a year ago. I'm sympathetic to the idea we don't want our time to be spent on these issues because we could spend so much time on them, and that does really worry me. At the same time, I don't want to say we never do it, and so I'm sort of looking for like a little rule or a little something or other that kind of says
Can John Paul
very rarely.
Can you go back the past 10 years? 12, 13 years now.
On the spot.
And I mean, other boards did not do this. We're moving into uncharted territory.
Other state boards do have this authority and use it.
I mean, our board
Us.
has us.
So certainly for the last 4 years, we have not, because I didn't think we should. I have been convinced that it is something that actually may be helpful. I think in terms of the burden on the time, I think that's a legitimate concern. I think one of the things that frankly might help is if board members wrote their own resolutions, if they want to do ceremonial resolutions for city councils, and bring them to the staff for final edits. That would help me, certainly. I mean, and I'm not saying that we don't want to help you write resolutions, because we do, and we're happy to help to do that type of drafting, but it does take away from time that for staff time. So if that's the biggest part of the concern, we have ways. I mean, I can easily sit down and teach every one of you how to write a resolution. Like, that's not a problem. So if the timing piece is the largest concern, I think we could find a way forward. If it's a concern over overreach of authority, I think that's a different question that I am not the right person to answer.
And also, my concern is, I mean, I'm glad you raised the issue of the staff time, because I do think that what you're proposing makes some sense. People should think about whether or not that's appropriate. I was thinking more about our own time together, which is limited, and the debates, and that I'd like to figure out a way that we can focus our debates on that.
So one of the things that if you'll note in the information from the DC Council, they do have restrictions on how many ceremonial resolutions each member can present, and the timing involved, and all that type of thing.
Second.
Now, there are also things, in our rules specifically, ceremonial resolutions do not have to be discussed at a working session prior to being on the agenda at a public meeting. So that wouldn't be a time suck of the working session piece. A sense of the council, I feel like, actually should be discussed at a working session. I think it's a policy issue that needs some discussion prior to a vote. So I think that would be something that would be added to the agenda. I don't get the sense that we would be doing these all the time, but I don't know that either. So
I would just say, I'm glad we're having this conversation. It is my hope that when we leave here with some sense, because it does seem like there's a level of inconsistency. I remember when Jessica brought up the climate change bill and everyone shut it down immediately, and now we're seeming to entertain other bills. And so if we're going to do them, I think we should do them and all for all resolutions of both versus picking and choosing topics that we favor.
I just want to clarify it. We didn't shut it down.
You shut it down.
No, we had a conversation, and I think this is the other issue that came up with that. Anyway, I mean, I can just speak for myself. I was asking questions. I wasn't saying.
You
shut this
indicated
down.
you would not vote for it.
That's my.
So
But
that-
I'm
I
just saying that's.
I guess my
different.
point is we should just vote, and whether you vote yay or nay, if we're gonna do it, we should do it for all of them versus kind of.
Exactly, and I guess, the reason why we're talking about this now is because this one just appeared, and that has kind of been the way, except for the climate change one, which, if we had discussed the other ones, I think we would have had, some people would have had questions about for various reasons, so I just wanted to say it's not personal. Like, if that was the one that came.
I don't think it's a matter of personal, but I do think to Zachary's point, it was a clear, the points that were asked and the reason I understood the board had multiple members who would vote against the resolution was that it was not something within our power. There was no formal action, it was your concern that there was nothing we could do and you wanted us to do something, but there was nothing we could do. And so the resolution was, I withdrew it because I was under the impression that you were not going to do these kinds of things. And so I share the concern that we now have two resolutions before us that seek to do something very similar. We can't do anything at all about them except endorse the issue and say it's important. I am in favor of a sense of the council resolution, but to the concern about time, I'm reading the details on the council's description, that no council member may bring more than 8 ceremonial resolutions during a council period. Being mindful of the fact that these are full-time jobs that the council has, compensated accordingly.
It's a part-time position.
Compensated accordingly with staff in a way that we are not, right? The board collectively has staff, but individual members do not. Thinking about some limit that is smaller on the sense of the council resolutions.
So we
One
should
per,
note
for
too that
instance, or 2.
the council period is also 2 years.
Correct. So it's 4 per year or 8 over 2.
There's a restriction on the ceremonial, not on the things.
Correct.
I know, but I'm saying I would favor a sense of the board resolution provision be added with a restriction on the number that any member could bring during the board period.
The only reason I take pause is because I think on a lot of issues, right, there could be something that just comes up that the board wants to take a position on, and it could be that by October all of us have introduced sense resolutions, but we think that this issue in particular is important enough that the board should take a stance on it. Then I think we've restricted ourselves, and I think being ahead of the critical issues of the day. Whereas I think it's less likely that that's going to happen on the ceremonial side.
Yeah, but I also said there's 9 of us, so if we said 2 per, that's 18 per year, which would be a significant number.
And I'd also suggest that having a restriction is an opportunity. If I've used both of my options and Zachary hasn't, then I'm going to call Zachary and say, hey, can you do me a solid and introduce this for me and it gives us a reason to call and talk to each other. I haven't talked to Emily on the phone in 11 months. I haven't talked to Ruth on the phone in 6 months. You know, this is an opportunity for us to actually talk to each other and figure out a way forward rather than being in these weird camps and being stereotyped and not talking to each other. That's not doing us any good.
I agree. I am concerned about putting restriction on ceremonial resolutions. Ceremonial resolutions are, they're supposed to be, you know, honoring a person, a place, a month, a day, a week, whatever. They're supposed to be something that we can all say, yay. They're not calling for an action. I am of the persuasion that we should be having more ceremonial resolutions, really looking at the work that our students are doing, our teachers are doing, honoring them and saying, yay, go you, look at the great things that our DC's public school and charter school students and teachers and parents are doing in our community. Highlighting those. I think we should be doing more of those. I got really upset when I saw an action being taken in a ceremonial resolution that was not unanimous, and what I felt very upset when I saw the resolution because it could have been at the time a ceremonial resolution. Everybody on this board is against children smoking. That is not the problem. So, I think that we should be having more ceremonial resolutions. Unlike some of my board member colleagues, I don't think we should be doing the sense of, obviously, the resolutions because we can easily put together a letter outside of our work. We don't need to do it on board time.
Well, I'll say I don't necessarily understand. I think the motivation to put a higher premium on celebrating the folks we serve, and put a lower premium on advocating on their behalf, right? And so like the sense of the board would I think we all believe, right, would be very focused on advocating on behalf of issues that pertain, right, to the well-being of our students, our schools, our families. And I think that should be something that the board should do. And I think we should take advantage of the opportunity to put our strongest voice forward, right? Not just write a letter from a hodgepodge of folks, but passing it on the dais to say that this is an issue that not just us as individuals, but us as a body believe are important. And that even if we don't have authority over them, we know that what we do have authority, right? What we do have authority over, these issues trickle in, right? And that we need action to make sure that our students and families can be successful. I mean, I totally agree with celebrating, right, our students, our families, our teachers, the folks doing the work, because I've done it plenty of times myself over the last year. But I also value, right, having the ability, and this body as a collective, right, all of us together having the ability to speak in one voice on behalf of our students and on the issues that we think are
mentioned it for people record.
Right.
If it's issued by the board versus if I would can I offer a suggestion or request, Jeff, retreat or
And I have a
for the sake of just time, is it possible, John Paul, to draft language that we could address tonight on this matter that we would then officially be able to vote on at the December meeting?
We're at the December.
It's at the December public meeting that we would be able to vote versus having to wait until January.
I would feel uncomfortable having a vote on language that wasn't actually in front of people tonight to discuss.
But that's
So
what I'm
the
saying.
bylaws-
If we spent time to draft it over the meeting and maybe come back to it, as well as any.
I've got to leave early, so that won't work for me.
Got it.
I'll get it out as soon as I can get it.
I have a question. I'm still lost on a couple of different distinctions. So just to go back to the beginning of the year, because in my mind, and I realize everybody's wasn't on the same page, doesn't necessarily see things together, that's part of being on board. But I made a distinction, which was, we had a resolution, I remember that it came from Zachary, and it was about some substantive topic around education. And we adopted it. And I remember saying at the time, I hope we won't do this a lot for exactly this reason.
Mental health supports.
Mental health supports, and it was relevant to a specific piece of legislation that was coming up, and so in that sense it was narrow, it was timely. I personally thought, okay, let's do it, let's not do it a lot, but let's do it. And I didn't have the same view about the climate change because it wasn't, the difference between the mental health supports in the schools that I represent versus the fact that we have a climate crisis. One is narrower, one is broader. And I understand we can all make our lines in different places, which is part of what makes this difficult. What I was trying to find was a line that sort of kept it pretty narrow, a couple a year or whatever.
Can I ask a clarifying question on
Yeah,
that?
and then I have another.
Tobacco piece?
Yes.
So where do you fall on the tobacco piece?
So let me.
Which line does that fall?
No, I am acknowledging. I find it very hard to draw the lines. Okay, so I get that. I agree with that. One question I have. I'm not having an opinion. I'm still at the questioning. I don't understand what the difference is between this idea of a sense of the council resolution and, in effect, what we adopted when we did the mental health supports back in February. I guess I don't understand why we need to complicate this.
De facto, that was a sense.
So why, I guess.
Well, I guess the vote in and of itself would be a sense of.
I mean, we're not creating a law here, right? We're creating a policy for ourselves, and we can change that over time. I mean, I don't even think we're suggesting bylaws changes. We're just saying, let's start out with a framework policy that sort of helps us self-regulate and doesn't overwhelm our staff and ourselves at our board meetings. And if we want to change it 3 months in, we can change it 3 months in, but, you know.
I think too, I would add that I expect that there'll be elements of any resolution on which we may not all agree. And so people may bring sense of the council, sense of the board resolutions, should we adopt this idea, that we don't pass because it is not the sense of the board. It is the sense of some of the board, not all of the board. And so thus we don't vote yay on it. What I would hope that this might accomplish is that it takes us out of the argument of is this ceremonial or policy. If it's policy, if it's not ceremonial, but we don't have authority over it statutorily, then it can't be policy. And it creates this third category that is, but it's something we think matters in the education space, and it deserves to be given due consideration by the body as something that we endorse or don't. To me, that's the distinction.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't know that we need the category because we already did it. We have it. I don't have.
I think the question is, should we have done it?
If we're, I thought Jessica had a good point. All right, so, I don't care about early to, birth to 3. Okay? So I'm just kidding.
He didn't mean that.
No, but what I'm saying is that the vote is 8-1.
Yeah.
Is that a sense of the board?
Yes. It would be the
So it's gotta be the majority.
Yes.
Okay, I think
Oh,
that's.
that was a hypothetical.
No, yeah.
Oh, I No, but that.
I think it's important.
Good question.
So the
I
sense,
did not.
so the sense of the board is a majority. I mean, that's something that we need. Then we just do it and we vote on it. And we go forward because we've been talking all this time about taking up time.
But then do we spend our staff resources, so for instance, comms, does comms highlight it on Twitter and Facebook and all this other stuff, like they would an actual state resolution, or do they not? Is it because we have no authority and
This be a part of our agenda.
Nothing is.
Can I make a potential suggestion? It seems to me that this is a really great discussion that potentially should happen a retreat session where we can talk about this and sort of help do exactly what Zachary was saying about define exactly what we mean. Because it seems to me that would be a really great professional training exercise as well. It's just sort of think, it'll be, we'll talk about that in a second. But I think by using that exercise, just to Jack's point, it'll be a really great professional training exercise for the board as well to think about what it is that this organization does and sort of help create those lines, even if they're faint lines. But I think that would be a potentially good opportunity.
I'm happy to do that as a theoretical exercise. I'm not happy to be making decisions at a retreat that should be made
Yes.
in an open meeting.
Yeah, a policy from that discussion would then have to be at a public meeting. Yes, absolutely.
So it seems that the question though of ceremonial resolutions just showing up on the night of that we have to vote on it is a different issue.
So
And so that,
ceremonial resolutions can be introduced at any time by any board member as long as there's notice. And the notice is 3 days prior to a meeting. So anyone who wants to send a ceremonial to, according to our current bylaws, and I try to get that information out to the board members as early as I can. I mean, I believe this particular resolution in November was listed on our website the Friday before. So it was not just sort of handed out, but it did follow the protocol that is currently in place.
right,
So I'm asking you, is it protocol that's currently in place? But coming from the staff, should we have to have certain rules that if we're going to do this, how we're going to do it, how much time you have?
Yes, that would definitely be part of that discussion. I think that would happen later.
Do we think that ceremonial resolutions should they be announced more than 3 days before?
Well, it's 3 business days too.
Right.
It's the Friday before. It's the same with all of our materials. Yeah.
should they be discussed, or should we have a chance to discuss that? Like,
But they're not asking them yet.
So essentially, anybody can bring it in, it's just, there's no discussion or vote.
There's a
they
vote.
they go in advance, everybody has seen them, I don't think that's ever been violated, and then,
I think the question is though, I don't wanna make an assumption, but the ceremonial resolution that was brought, with the 3 days business on the tobacco piece, differs from this definition of a ceremonial resolution. And so that's the question, I think, like, acknowledging the Dunbar High School as the winner of the 50th anniversary Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna get anyone objecting to voting to recognize Dunbar as the winner.
We could bring the ceremonial resolutions for December, honoring or
What's the law?
acknowledging the 4th anniversary of SM. I mean, that's a ceremonial resolution, stuff like that. But that's why there was,
Is it your position that it should be earlier?
no,
no,
You think
this is the
I
question.
mean, because those types of resolutions are,
Nobody's objecting to peace t-shirt.
right, okay, so just to sort of bring this one in, so it sounds like our current policy on ceremonial resolutions, everybody's fine with, insofar as they're not ceremonial, they're not gonna be treated as ceremonial. And as happened last time. And then we'll take the broader piece to the retreat and try to sort of see if we can come to some kind of articulated policy about when we do, when we don't, how many, whatever, that would sort of allow, I think the consensus, and we may not have a total consensus, is to try to figure out a way to occasionally be able to project a point of view on something, but not do it a lot. And how do we do that? How do we set rules for that?
So Zach about the whole business always,
Well, that's when we come to do it.
Selfishly,
So-
can I request, since the precedent has already been established, for us to take a vote on these, or at least, and then still take it to the retreat? Out of fairness to Marcus, and selfishly myself. And if the board objects, I'm fine with that, but in full transparency, I did invite some people to testify on the importance of birth to 3 during the public comment. And so I just think it would be more relevant if we were to pass it then versus wait.
I feel you, bro.
So I would say, I mean, my general take is that both of these would fall under a sense of the board. And so I do think it's complicated.
Yeah.
to vote for them now, knowing that they are not ceremonial, and that there is no action we can take on either of them, and that then squarely puts them in this third new category we're talking about creating.
It was my understanding that we were not voting or discussing at the retreat whether or not to do those third category type resolutions, but more so what the parameters around them are. And so that was why I
I
was
would
asking.
say at this moment, we can do it however we want. I would say at this moment, we don't yet have a new policy. Our policy is what it has been, which is insofar as a majority decides that this is an appropriate thing to do, we can do it. But I think in voting for it, people should take into account this discussion.
Let me also ask, and I could be, what's the time crunch on any of these? Anything's gonna matter in January. Birth to 3 is not gonna be voted for before the holiday break.
No, but I would, one, as I mentioned, I invited people, but also there's an effort as we're approaching the budget cycle to build momentum, and it was totally selfish. I don't think it's going to make a break, but I would just prefer it to be.
Well,
Well, I
we should
think-
invite people to convince us to vote.
That's right. And so, I mean, you can
Because you know I'm not convinced.
Mr. Bachelor
Just kidding.
invited people at the last, and we did not vote on his.
that is right.
But that's because it was switching categories, so I do think that is different.
No, but it was
When
still.
Marcus put his
still
forward as a ceremonial, then it was raised that it wasn't really appropriately ceremonial, so he agreed to bring it back in December as a policy resolution. And the birth to 3 was always, a resolution,
And I
whatever
would
we
say-
call it, a sense of.
And I would say I would not want it to be, I would want it to be the overwhelming majority of the board. So if the sense of the board was, we should wait, I think that's great. If it were just 5 people that said, let's do it now, I don't think that's a good idea. If that's to be fair.
I mean, but you do want it to be.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Alright,
I don't want it to just be a majority. I want it to be consensus of the majority.
So here's my suggestion to moving forward is that you should poll people. You want it either a supermajority or not to do it, is what you're saying. I think you should poll people and determine whether or not you want to bring it in December.
Well, I actually was gonna ask if we could vote people right now, whether or not, for both, not one or the other, to bring it to the board, or should we just wait? Or should we not do a raising hand type thing? I get it.
I would concur with Ashley on this, that I think we should wait, that if we're gonna set policy and precedent on how we engage in resolutions as a board, and we think this is something we're gonna do in January, that we should put it in January. I'm very much in favor personally of the content of both resolutions, but having had this whole long discussion about this new process, I'd rather we do it under the new process.
I think the precedent's been set already, I think by official action of the board, and while I think, there could be some tweaking to our processes to make sure we refine it and that, I think there's more input by the collective before it comes before us. I don't see the large distinction between what we've done before and what we're considering today.
What we did before was remove the climate change resolution from action because it didn't fit in one of our categories. That we set that precedent.
I'm sorry, that's.
We've also
that's
passed
not-
a resolution around mental health supports, right? I mean,
But we acknowledge that that was not a ceremonial resolution, and that it was a state resolution on which we could take no action.
Right, just to clarify, our policy in the past has been that on issues that were neither ceremonial nor things that we had control over, we could adopt resolutions if we so chose. And each of us has our own way of deciding that, and on them, a majority decided to vote for the mental health supports and not for the climate change. Just to be clear,
No one was brought to a vote on the climate change. I pulled it
right,
based on the rather vigorous objections of 3 of my colleagues,
right.
from whom I did not expect, frankly, the level of animosity towards a climate change resolution protecting our most vulnerable city residents, and decided, clearly this isn't gonna pass, I'm gonna pull it. So we didn't vote on it,
No, I
because it
understand,
was
but
pulled based on your feedback, in large part, Madam President.
Yes, exactly. It was big. So what I'm saying
So I'm
is
saying,
the
we voted on
distinction.
things that seemed collegial and on controversial issues, I made a call to pull it.
Yeah, okay. And
I'm saying
I
at this
don't
point,
know.
I think this is becoming controversial, and I would ask for the same kind of consideration that
You are
I gave
welcome
to
to
my
ask-
colleagues.
You are welcome to ask your colleagues to do it as you do.
If we can just finish with just a short tally, Jack, do you want to just share? So we have two people that say wait, one person says move forward. Not to put you on the spot.
Who says move forward?
Mark, I was going to go around everyone. I'm just asking your thoughts.
I mean, if the president would have shown as much support for the climate change resolution as she's shown for these others, I would be all in favor of, moving forward. But she didn't, and I'm not.
I think we're talking about what we're all gonna do together, not about her personality, right?
Then I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah. It's fine.
I think that's all.
Don't feel any
Wait,
pressure. I just
you're
want to give
voting on
everyone an opportunity to speak on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass
I know you don't care for everybody.
I love North to 3. I think we should wait.
Work to 3 is my chosen field, but I don't think waiting until January.
And so, oh, sorry.
I mean, I guess I go along with that. I mean, I personally found both of these to sort of fall within my rather narrow band of what I think it's worth, voting on and spending time on. But I agree, people want to talk about it and.
So just to be consistent with where I stood, I will also say we should wait just because it didn't seem like the overwhelming majority of people. Sorry, Marcus. It didn't seem like the overwhelming majority of the board wanted to move forward.
Well, it's just the agenda and then discuss it at the retreat.
Yeah, that's what I said. That doesn't mean we don't care.
I know. I totally agree.
And in addition, so to recognize the great advocates that came to talk about anti-smoking at the November hearing, I think having the advocates still come and talk about Versa 3 during public comment is still very beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And I also think that another option is that the David can it go back to a ceremony, can it go to a strictly ceremonial, because I know there were people that wanted to come back for it. So,
My preference would be that, that if we pass it, that our colleagues use the very strong voices we have in our community to spur action. Not
So
just
to
to
do
say
it-
smoking is bad, right? I think we all agree that smoking is bad. What we do about it,
But this isn't about smoking.
right.
This
Thank you.
is, this is about something that's much more dangerous than smoking.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
okay,
All
you know
right.
what, guys, I'm gonna,
That's where we differ, and
You're right.
But here's the thing.
I have lots of
The
statistics I can
issues
give.
No statistics.
The issues
all
over.
right, can we, we're gonna have a discussion, we're gonna get recognized, so, you.
No, I think we should move on, because the merits of the actual resolution and pros and cons do not need to be discussed at this time.
Do you wanna comment?
Well, my hope is that we have a productive discussion at our retreat, and that, I think hopefully after we come up with a clear process, that we don't, I think, use bureaucracy to further stymie our ability to speak on behalf of the issues that matter to our students and families.
All right.
If I could just offer, while we wait on that, maybe it might not be a bad idea to take action on that idea for those who are in agreement to just offer a letter for people to sign on, to then follow up with the resolution. Just for that.
I think we need to talk about the whole thing.
Yes, still talking about it, but if there was a sense of wanting to do something now.
All right, so, finishing the executive director's report, do you have any, you want to talk about 2020?
I do. So in your binders as well is a proposed 2020 calendar of meetings. This includes all working sessions, student advisory committee meetings, and public meetings for the entire year 2020. There are 3 on here that I've highlighted for discussion. The first is February 19th. That is during the the DCPS break. Typically, in the past, we have rescheduled if it's during DCPS break because we recognize that a lot of our residents leave town during those breaks.
Hold on.
Yes.
This is, Ash Wednesday. That's not February. There's no Ash Wednesday. Is Ash Wednesday in February?
Start early this year.
Oh, okay.
So
Didn't we have it on Ash Wednesday?
we
Last
did.
year.
Yeah.
I came with ashes. Yeah, we had the new DME come to speak.
Right. So the question is, do we keep it on the 19th of February, which is during DCPS break, or move it to the 26th, recognizing that it is Ash Wednesday, and it's also fairly close between that date and the March working session, which is limited time for staff to get things done. We've done it before, I'm just saying.
I have a question. Can it go on a Tuesday? Can it go on that Tuesday instead of
So the 11th,
Oh, 18.
the?
sorry,
Still
yeah,
right.
the 18th.
Oh, right.
So the break. So, I mean, we could potentially do break at the 25th.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a winter break these days.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna
Which the Ash Wednesday day.
So
I'm-
we're doing this.
So our
26th.
so is the agreement to move to the 26th?
I mean,
So we're moving
it's,
the
seems like it's worse for
February 19th meeting to the 26th.
Okay.
But then I want to just defer to people who are less familiar with the customs. My understanding from last year is it's not the kind of
It's
holiday you don't have a meeting on the next one.
You
Okay.
just go to my church that day.
No masses.
Multiple
Very
times.
few masses after 5 o'clock.
All right. So that is moved now to February 26th. The 18th. The mayor's office called us and said that they have overridden our booking of the old council chambers for March 18th as an alternate date for her prep meetings for her budget. So they advised us that we should probably try to find a different location.
We already.
Take out all the
lines
in the building. Let's
Um,
go to her office.
Can we have the council?
How about the council? So my suggestion for this is that we retain the date of March 18th. I have objected strongly to the mayor's position, and I will continue to speak with her office about finding on an alternative location for her prep meeting. Alternative date.
Okay, let's say she doesn't agree, all right? So we have to find another place.
The old council chamber is controlled by the state board, but it's also in the.
Are they asked?
It is under the day-to-day operational control of DGS. So that's where it's a little. Right now, I suggest we keep the March 18th date, and I will update if things change.
I have an alternative as well, which maybe I had hoped we could also put broadly on the retreat agenda, which was we talked about having these meetings out in the community. And we haven't really come to grip with what that would mean and where we would go and why we would do it, but maybe this is an opportunity to sort of say, let's really focus on that date and try to think of a place where we might do such a meeting.
We could do the arc.
Could I
The
also?
only problem is, maybe John Paul, you're gonna say, is that everything's set up to film. But what about where we were today? Everything's set up to
Which is
film.
where we have had meetings in the past is in the council chambers room 412, which is an alternative. I should also note there's potential that the old council chambers will be closed to all between January and May for construction. So we may have to move all of these dates to a different location. I'm much more focused now about the actual day rather than location, because location I can change and fix. The admin communities we have looked at in the past, and we will continue to do so. We would need to pay the Office of Cable Television to come with a crew, and that can be expensive for them to bring out the mobile truck to do the broadcast from wherever we are, if it's not already set up to do that with the cable television's access. So it needs to be a
So, all right.
DC-controlled building. I mean, there's
So
things.
here's what I propose for our retreat, that one of the sessions be about this and that staff let's use that as a time to sort of think about what it is that it would take to do this. We've raised it. Find out what we need to know, what's the cost, let's talk about it, let's decide.
Let me-
and,
We can't
We
decide.
can't decide.
Can't decide.
Cannot decide.
Open Meetings Act violation.
Okay, but I mean,
We will
let's
bring
think through
information.
the options there.
We will bring
Will you know by the time of the retreat about whether they're gonna close down?
I don't know. I've been asking DGS since June to move forward on the construction. I ended up writing my own statement of work and sending it to them for them to review because I was tired of waiting. So we're going to continue those conversations. So, like I said, my recommendation is to right now maintain this at March 18th on your calendars, and we will send updated calendar invites for all of these. But I just want to make sure we go through them. The last one then is April 15th. Again, this is a DCPS break. April 15th through Emancipation Day is a DCPS break that week. So I recommend moving it to April 22nd.
We've historically not had a quorum when we've been in session the week of spring break.
Easter, yeah.
I have the same conflict I had a couple months ago when we had to move a meeting that I've got a standing fellowship event that night, but it's fine. I understand.
So, my last suggestion would be, can we triple check the October public meeting in the old council chambers? Because that's where we do early voting, and last year, early voting started on October 22nd.
So again, location, I'm much more concerned about dates rather than location. We can shift locations more easily, I think, than notifying the public.
I agree, we're just agreeing what's on this sheet. I want to make sure that we're
Yes.
So we're just
It
doing
is-
April 22nd.
It is likely that that meeting will have to move location. Yes.
okay. And then
The 15th. And the same for, likely for the May meeting, we will likely have to move that meeting regardless to probably the council chambers 412 because of early voting.
And please look at religious holidays. I had to miss a meeting because a religious holiday was not raised on time a couple of years ago. It still smarts because it was the first meeting I missed.
So this has been checked against all of the calendars in the public space that we have access to. So all the DCPS calendars, all the religious calendars, etc. But
And Ramadan falls close to the 22nd, but not on it, right?
correct.
So we are changing to April 22nd.
That's the
Yes.
question.
That's
Yes.
big. Okay.
Yes.
And then the other date that we haven't changed for is the NASB meeting. Do we know those dates? And is that-
I don't believe the dates for the NASB have
They
been
haven't been
released yet, but we can ask Karen, who sits on NASB's board, to ask Robert to check on that.
I do request, probably be the same day, but, November 18th, they already have another alternative event, but it's likely that our board meeting will follow that day.
Yeah, it's hard because that's the Thanksgiving. We can't really
Yeah,
do a week.
exactly.
Great. Okay.
I do.
Oh yeah.
Wait a minute, that's November actually.
Yeah.
What was the date?
What? Oh, no, I'm not pregnant yet.
I also want to note one more thing, and that has to do with the upcoming events. Please do check these and go through them. There's one that I want to make sure to note for you. We sent information related to the Public Charter School Board hosting a session for elected officials related to their executive search. That date has been canceled and has been shifted to a new date. And I am not sure if this 111 is correct, because that wasn't confirmed to me yet that that's the correct date. Because I think it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be 12/11.
No, it is 12/11.
It is not 12/11.
Well, there is a community event, I think, on the 11th.
The
No,
community
they sent
forum.
it out yesterday.
yeah.
Yes,
I
and that
talked-
has been canceled.
Okay, okay, got it.
The PCSB is likely going to reschedule that for January
Okay, good,
That's out.
for elected officials only. Yes, that one.
got it.
This is for elected.
This is the elected officials one has been canceled.
I think they are still holding a public event.
I think they are holding a public event. it's my understanding the council's Christmas holiday party is that day, whatever day the elected officials was supposed to be, so they're rescheduled. And then there was also so between now and the next board meeting, there are a couple events. Actually sent out one today for the 10-year anniversary of ESSA that's happening on Capitol Hill, and I think there was another one that I sent out. So I want to make sure check your emails for those events as well, so because you won't see them on an event chart because we don't have a meeting between them.
But you'll send us out the final when we know it is selected.
Yes, we'll send you.
And Aussie just sent out a thing about school climate conference.
Yes, that's the one. Thank you.
Yeah.
On December 13th.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Okay, so now are we gonna skip 5 and 6?
Just FYI, I'm gonna be in the other room listening in.
My suggestion would be that these items be removed from the agenda until the discussion is pertinent. Sure.
All right, that then brings us to the discussion of the STAR framework and the school report card discussion. And this is really gonna be the staff is gonna sort of present to us sort of where we are, some timelines and some issues like that.
And while Matt's getting set up, Aussie will be coming to our January working session to talk about these issues. And so the idea for tonight is Matt is going to provide some foundational information and timeline information. That way we all know where we are foundationally for that conversation with Aussie.
Great. All right.
Can I interrupt one quick question? I'm sorry. A constituent actually just texted me to say that they're watching the working session and that the PCSB elected official roundtable was the 19th, and now it's being rescheduled. So it was not the 11th; it was the 19th, and now being rescheduled.
Thank you, constituent.
Yeah. Hey, when I tell you that people reach out, I'm not kidding.
Great.
They also watch us, which is kind of
Thank you, Mr. Sutter.
I guarantee my dad's now watching.
All right. So I'm going to jump right in. I think there were originally 20 minutes on this agenda. I know we're running behind, so I just want to quickly recap a few things on the STAR framework in light of the release of the school report card data for 2019 last week. Just talk about some of the things that have been going on over the past few years with Aussie, and then as they come back, kind of what the status of a lot of their commitments to the state board is as we go into the new year. So, as you know, the school report card data dropped last week. The new STAR ratings for 2019. You've heard all of this before, but the STAR rating is an index rating with a twist with the stars on top of it, with the quintiles. It looks a little bit different from K to 8 through 9 to 12, but basically this is how that number that was attached to every school profile is being added up. So I mostly compiled this from my own edification, but also just thinking about how the points and the slices of the pie are being divided. You'll obviously notice from up here that there is no academic growth measure in high school. That is the biggest difference between K through 8 and high school is that they don't have that, but it's a work in progress, and we'll talk about that later on. Once these scores are added up for all students in the school, there's one last wrinkle, which is a little bit where they will take all of the scores in the school and then run them through one last filter, which is meant to amplify and assign greater weight to certain student subpopulations within a school. Students with disabilities, students who are at risk, English language learners, and then subgroup points by race and ethnicity, depending on racial ethnic groups that are represented at that school. That's the last 5 points. If this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, there's an example of if you had a school that was had about an 80 rating overall, but was not necessarily doing as strong a job of serving students who were at risk or students with disabilities, it would run through this calculation, and you would see that once this is all done, they would end up at about 76.5, so off of the 80 rating. This is meant just to assign a little bit greater weight there. I'm happy to talk about this more at another time, but it's basically that formula we'll see in coming years, especially as the trends go from year to year, whether or not this is something that they'll revisit. And finally, once you get that 0 to 100 rating, it's what quintile you wind up in determines the number of stars. So There's a lot this year about schools that gained stars, lost stars, in some cases gained or lost 2 stars in one go. And this means that they moved more than 20 points and dropped skipped an entire quintile to land in the next one over. So here's what's new for 2019. We had the first 4 talking points you've heard on a conference call, or you'll hear again in another presentation. 76 schools earned 4 or 5 star ratings. That works out to 9,100 more students attending a 4 or 5 star school. There's now 1 5-star school in every ward. 27% of schools improved by 1 or more stars. What else did we? There's more to the story than that. I think we saw in some of the initial analyses that there were a lot of schools that improved stars. There were a lot of schools that also fell back down. We heard from the state superintendent that some of that is attributable to academic growth. That as an instrument, it's I think this is something that they'll continue to look at. But some of the fluctuation might be attributable right now to swings in growth that or in one or both growth metrics that might be driving that. And there's new resources on the DC School Report Card website. I liked this infographic, so I just took it directly from OSSI, but they made public a discussion guide now for families to use in conversation with schools. And most importantly, you can now see trend data from 2018 to 2019, whereas before you only had 1 data point, so we could see where everyone was at. We can now look at how schools did this year versus last year. And it's on that last point that I think this opens up a lot of interesting new opportunities for analysis by us and also by lots of people on Twitter and on the just general DC education sphere. There's a lot here. So I'm going to give you 3 quick graphs that are very rough, but are meant to serve as a plug for the kind of analyses that we can look into, and then ask that, if there are questions that you have, that you ask us, because I think we'd be happy to dive into more of these types of analyses. So the first one is to focus on what a lot of people have thought might be the short-term implications of the star rating, and that's on student enrollment and the percentage of students who are at risk in a specific school, and how the star rating overall might correlate with at-risk percentage of a school. The blue circles out here, this is 2018, orange is 2019. So you continue to see a pretty strong correlation here. The line is slightly different, but I think it's the effect is strong. We'll continue to look at that and at a subgroup analysis just to see what's going on there. But I just wanted to throw that up there because it was interesting. Number 2 of 3. This is looking at the percentage of students at risk and the change in the score from 2018 to now. You're seeing some of the bigger gains on average from schools that serve higher at-risk populations, ever so slightly. I think that it's encouraging that this line is not tilted down, in that you would see the highest score gains going to students in schools that are least at risk. That might look like a downward sloping line there. The fact that it is largely flat and pretty scattered suggests that at-risk percentage did not drive, at the highest level, didn't drive these score differences from last year to this year. But again, this is 1 year of data, so it's early to say. And I'll just leave with this one. This is one hypothesis about the release of the school report card in 2018 in the star ratings was that it would ignite some kind of student outflows and inflows in schools. That especially with families with the means and the information to change schools or to be responsive to a star rating or something like a quality rating, that you might see jumping and movement across schools and across wards, and that you might even see some kind of intensifying segregation there as a result of the ratings. So in looking at the student percentage and the change in at-risk population, that's the x-axis here, versus the subsequent change in the rating in 2019, you see that this line is largely flat. Is sort of an indication that that kind of stratification is not yet occurring, at least not yet. Some schools over here that have a lot of some schools with high at-risk percentages had a lot of great gains, especially on the DCPS side, whereas other schools that you see the population shift to be comparatively less at risk, but that doesn't necessarily have a bearing on what happened on their star rating in 2019. I'm encouraged. Yes.
I didn't understand that at all. So on the right-hand side, the line is slightly sloping downward. That means what?
So I broke this out by sector, mostly because it was interesting to me that there were a lot. You see a lot of high gains on the DCPS side. That's to the right. I apologize for the contrast on this projector, but yes, the fact that it's tilted slightly would suggest that there was. You see, with schools that from 2018 to 2019 became less at risk, that there's slightly higher score gains on average. But again, it's sort of
So slightly, I'm just saying that slightly as the at-risk got higher, the at-risk got lower, the scores got higher by a tad, or the
Just-
opposite.
Yeah, just on average, we're looking at a very small difference. On average, all the bubbles in this cloud shifting slightly to the left, meaning that on average, I think we see the district student population as a whole get slightly less at risk than last year. But it's again, these are not big shifts. So this is kind of all really a starting point. It's something that we did after we did the initial rankings and just to see who went up and who went down. As far as the next steps on this go, we're kind of interested and we'll continue to look into some of these. And as far as the questions that we explore, I think that's where you all will come in. If there are things that you're interested in seeing and things that we can probe in the data, please let us know. Either just tell me directly or just send me an email or let John Paul know. And it's something that we can prioritize. Because I know that now that all of this data is available, that it's people are going over it. There's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack, and I think we could learn a lot.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Matt? When you went back at the earliest part of the presentation, when you were talking about the way OSSE weights, that slide right there.
Yep.
So one piece of critique I've seen a fair bit out on the Twitterverse is that this star rating tells us who attends a school, not how a school does with their students. What I think I understood from this slide is that that this calculation tells us how a school does with the students in their building, and it weights students that might be considered at risk in addition to special ed, et cetera, a little higher. So if I have an overall rating of 80 going into it, but I serve a high at-risk population and my at-risk kids didn't do very well, that would be reflected in my STAR score?
Yes, it would. Your students who are at risk would be counted in the all-student rating, and then they are counted again in the orange block, and where OSSE is looking right at that subgroup only, and looking at specifically at how a school is managing to serve those populations.
So it's fair to say that the STAR rating does tell us about how a school is doing with the kids in its school, and it is giving weight, extra weight, to populations we know typically don't perform as well in our city and certainly nationwide on some of these measures. It's actually weighting more heavily those students that might be considered at risk of failure.
That's my interpretation. I think that to me this says that they were trying to design a metric that would incentivize schools to focus on those subgroup populations and think critically about how they are serving, how they provide those kinds of supports.
Got it. So conversely, if my school knocked it out of the park with my at-risk kids, that would help my STAR score.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. That's helpful.
So wait, can I just, so you're saying if the score was 80, but then the at-risk kids did really well, then it would go up?
Yes, then I think, let's say if it was hypothetically 100, then you would probably see the number that I've got here, the 7650, would come up in the end, and it might, I think you could actually achieve something above the all-student score.
So what is the 75? That's all the students in the school.
That's how.
Or conversely, if a school does not do well by their at-risk kids, they're going to get dinged. But then I guess it begs the question, just the proportions, right? And so while it is weighted, if it's a school that's being judged on this metric that has 85% students at risk, versus a school that has 10% at risk, that proportion may not necessarily pick up the magnitude of what's actually happening.
Right, these numbers will stay fixed regardless of the percentage overall. I mean, it's still at risk will be.
That is good to know about the weight, because I don't know if I was fully aware of that. Last question. Are you saying that's new or that's always been there?
This has always been.
That's always been.
Yeah.
How do you get 75?
Oh, that was the hypothetical score that I cited.
Okay, how do you get 80?
English language learners.
Same thing.
Huh?
Same thing. These are just kind of dummy numbers across the top that I just assigned to the student groups as an example of a school that.
No, but the 75 is the weight that goes to the overall.
No, I know that, but
That's-
okay, show me go backwards again. How do I get my score?
So you take the numbers here.
No, I'm saying you go.
He wants the percentage for high school versus elementary school, middle school.
No, I want to know how. Okay, academic achievement is 40%.
That's right. But at the high school level, 25% of that is PARC, and the other 15% is SAT measures.
And okay, and so what does that say? 38.
39% is school
39%.
environment, which is a lot of things. It's school attendance. It's
No,
AP.
it's a lot. It's a lot of things that don't have to do with that are numbers, right? Like
Yes.
attendance,
Attendance, AP,
graduation rate.
graduation rate is separate. Actually.
Graduation rate is 11,
Yes.
and ELL access growth is 5. Is it?
5% on both. Yep.
So what is 40%?
That is academic growth in elementary school, which is
What is it? What is it? No, it's in high school. It's 40%. That's the PARC
That's
test.
academic achievement.
achievement. Yeah, percentage of PARC 3 or higher, MSAA 4 or higher, PARC 4 or higher, MSAA is the 3. So it's PARC proficiency, and then SAT. So SAT college ready benchmark, and then the percentile versus DC average. That's 10 points and 5 points. Happy to go into this, like the actual
No,
breakdown.
I think you like it.
No, he's good.
But yeah, it is very different, and that's why I wanted to throw this in. But so one last slide with too much information on it.
I don't put those bubbles up there.
So this is where we are right now in the timeline. I just wanted to begin in 2017, since the passage of the S Estate Plan. We are right here right now, right after the release of the school report card, and looking into the next couple calendar years.
Red stars like you weren't here, so we're used to that.
There are so 3 things just to keep in mind. The first is investment in schools.
Are you gonna go back to that first one?
I can.
So that plan engagement, that's a newly planned Aussie outreach?
Yes, and I'm going to talk about it in just a minute.
That's what.
The first thing is investment in schools. And I wanted to call your attention to this. This was the Comprehensive Support 1 grant funding that OSSI was going to make $11 million available. And the update on this is that they have done so. These are the schools right here that receive Comprehensive Support 1 funding, and we'll do that for the next 3 school years. Of course, this is the first of the 3 school years. They will then identify new Comprehensive Support 1 schools in December 2021, the end of 2021, which is important for other reasons, and I'll get to that. The second is high school growth, which we've now got a proposal. Yes.
I know you're probably annoyed we keep pausing.
No,
But just beyond the money, are there any other forms of support that IC is providing those schools?
I think with the targeted support schools, which is the CS2 schools, there are some supports. I would have to look into what those are. I know they said that there were, based on those designations, that they would work to support schools in various ways. CS1 is the one that has money attached to it.
I'm curious from my colleagues whether you all have you heard anything from your Comprehensive Support 1 schools? Because I've heard pretty good things coming out of Elliott Hine, that the plan they created and got funding for, they're working it with DCPS, and the school community is feeling like they're getting support from DCPS to improve. And now they've got 2 stars, which is a big whole star increase.
Likewise, I've heard from Langley that they're getting a lot of support from DCPS.
Yes.
The question for me is like, what is OSSI's role, or are they deferring to DCPS to provide those supports? Well, yeah, I know, but I meant like, are they doing anything beyond?
I can get back to you on that just to find out. I know the money has been there since the end of last school year, but beyond that, I want to look into that more.
I think in terms of the one and the cost, the cautious optimism, I mean, they're getting the comprehensive support dollars as well as the hope is that over time, that begins to kind of uplift democracy from conference sites is closed.
So that is the last wrinkle here. And
Why?
two of those CS1 schools have now been absorbed by other charter LEAs, and I am working to try and get an answer on what happens to their eligibility for that federal funding.
And democracy prep closed altogether. Right. So I don't know what happens to
If I remember right, the funding that was supposed to be going to democracy prep was then reallocated to the rest of the schools,
to the rest of
the rest of the comprehensive
gotcha.
CS1s.
But you're not sure.
I am 92% sure.
Is that why it says 10 rather than 11?
Yes.
Yeah, because the grants were only provided to 10 schools rather than 11. So I'm like I said, I'm fairly certain that's where that function was.
Is that, so why isn't Roosevelt on there? Roosevelt. Roosevelt and Square.
Because it is one of the CS, because it is comprehensive score one. I might have just left it up. That might be the.
We'll confirm.
Okay.
You said Roosevelt.
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 Roosevelt, if you will.
I think it's a Isn't that tomatoes what I think? Anyway, Roosevelt, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, is that one? I am.
Just to wrap things up on high school growth. So as you know, I've got a proposal now. Algebra 1, English 1 part testing is going to be mandatory over this school year and next. And from that, they will construct and model the growth metric. The key date to remember here is March 1st, 2021, which is the latest date in 2021 in which the United States Department of Education will accept amendments to state ESSA plans. And I think it is my understanding that OSSI will try to, if there's going to be an amendment on the state ESSA plan, it's going to be in that year, and that it will, things are going to happen around that date for inclusion on the 2021 school report card.
And am I remembering correctly? Sorry, I'm not raising my hand. Did Ossie say, I'm from New York, that once the growth measure goes into effect, we're going to keep it for 3 years? Is that what they said?
Yes, I think
Likely that is true. That
That's
has been
probably what
consistent.
they proposed.
I would note too that this is according to current deadlines, right? So if U.S. Department of Ed changes that deadline, then this might also be changed as well. But they've been thus far somewhat consistent on keeping that March 1st date as the date for submission in order to get something into the next report card, which is December of that same year.
And Ruth, to your question about outreach, this block over here, OSSI is going to begin an ESSA state plan engagement process in school year 2021, which I assume will include what they plan to do with growth, among other things, and I think that will involve us at some point, but that's their timeline to do it before March.
So just so I can understand this, and this is not to pick on you, but it's to, so the one thing that says ESSA plan engagement, which is over school year 2021, you're saying actually the plan is to do it in 2021, 22?
No, he's saying that's where it is. School
That
year
is where it is.
2021.
Yeah.
Like
The
one.
engagement isn't, okay.
Is to do prior to the submission of a amendment to the plan. Yes.
The modeling.
Yeah.
The modeling.
Why did they decide to keep the farm?
That's a much longer conversation that I don't
And I think it's a question that we need to really,
Sounds like a great question to ask Ossie.
The reason I'm saying that is, if you look at that, parts being given in April 2020.
Yep.
Parts being given in April 2021, and then they said the hell with it. And so, the parts not being given in 2022, right?
No, it will be.
It is.
Are we the only people in the United States using the park now?
No. There are other states using sections of park or parts of it, or have renamed some of it and are using individual modules of it. We're one of the few that is using, I think, the full park.
we're the only at this.
And the military, U.S. military schools.
One last note, and that's on access to opportunities. So, as you know, all of these metrics here are out of 95 points, and that's because 5 points was originally in the state ESSA plan for the inclusion of an access to opportunities measure, and so that ultimately at the very end they multiply everything 100 over 95 and then they get it. But at some point, OSCE will return about an access to opportunities metric, and it sounds like at this point in time, we're a little bit stuck. I think that OSCE has encountered challenges with getting access to the course level data that they would need to implement that measure as originally envisioned. So there was originally a full year pilot that was going to be scheduled for actually last school year. Now it was this school year, and now it's kind of like in a state of flux. So I might expect that in the near future, access to opportunities will come up, and there might be an alternative proposal coming.
What do you mean by we can't gain access?
I think they just had issues with.
There is not a standard course catalog for District of Columbia public schools. Not DCPS, I'm talking public schools as in DCPS and all charters. So it's challenging to do something that is statewide at that type of level.
Are there other states that have similar problems, or do other states have common course codes across all counties, cities, whatever?
I think there are a number of states that certainly have that challenge, especially at the state level. Is the states that I'm thinking of? I believe Arizona has one, and they have a fairly thriving charter sector as well, and so that might be a place that they could look. I know that OSCE certainly talks with the folks in Arizona as well. I'm not sure about New Mexico, whether or not they have a standard course catalog. It's a different thing, right? Because it's a different problem for us because we are sort of a unique entity than it is for other states.
Is it a problem for us because of the independence of the charters here?
I don't
Compared
think
to the charters in Arizona?
Well, I'm saying that we're arguably better equipped to do it because of our.
I think that is a possibility as well.
What's true?
I think there's a lot of unknowns on that, and I think that's one of the questions that we can certainly ask OSCE to give us more additional information in January.
And just to clarify that accident, as a reminder, that access to opportunity section I think came out of our conversation around well-rounded, and that that was like the translation for that final proposal.
Yes. Which OSCE also recognized was something that they wanted to include as well. I mean, it's not that, it's why it's in the plan, because they agreed that there's something to look at.
Well, I mean, I think, so one thing I find helpful in thinking of the challenges of these things, like I'm doing a project for a day job client in a given state where there are multiple large city school districts, and then there are many, many township school districts. And for me, it's sometimes helpful to think about DC as that. Like, we have a large city school system, and then we have an awful lot of township school districts. And so when I think about it that way, it makes me wonder about how other states manage the kinds of challenges we face with these independent school districts, much in the same way that, like, a town with 4 schools is operating very differently than a city with 45.
But they're subject to the same state laws, so that makes it.
But that's what I mean by course codes, right? Like, so obviously there's subject to the state laws, but in this particular state that I'm working on, you see enormous variance in the way the local school districts interpret state law when it comes to special education, which would be a thing you think might have an awful lot of commonality, but it's interpreted massively differently across these local jurisdictions, which is again why I'm thinking, like, for course codes, like, well, I can see why a state wouldn't have a state course catalog. So how would this town versus that city versus that town do it, and then how can we maybe learn from that?
Yeah.
So to summarize, the 2019 report card data is out. There is a lot of it. It is very interesting, and I welcome all of the questions that you have. OSCE will be back in January, and I think we're going to get a lot of updates from them at that time. If you have any other questions about the STAR, the future of any of the things that you just saw, please feel free to talk to me or Alex anytime. We're happy to do that.
So whether or not you like the bubbles or not,
We can talk about it.
Thank you, Alex.
I just hate that I didn't get it before the meeting. I said I'm gonna do something about it.
Yeah, do it, addendum.
We can turn this into chart stuff as well, so it would be helpful. Sure.
And so the discussion in January is gonna be sort of about their plans going forward, sort of how that, that's sort of
It's
the
the
gist of the
regular
idea.
update, yeah. It's, I think actually in the accountability plan itself, it says that OSSI will come back regularly to the board and update on progress and those sorts of things. So it's a large look at sort of all of these things that Matt just went over in terms of the accountability plan. Right after the start of the year. Perfect.
What a great way to kick off 2020.
Exactly.
So before we go into committee reports, the air conditioning went on, so I regained my voice. So the one other thing I did want to raise was just to talk a little bit about the sort of the meetings and the calendars going forward. So the December winter meeting, which we talked about very briefly, I guess at the November working session, we're going to sort of do a follow-up around the council's dyslexia discussion. And here's the frame I want to put around. I think what we did today in terms of this teacher attention, it really was sort of this great example of what we're able to do. And in terms of bringing voice and bringing attention to an issue. And I think we've all been sort of trying to figure out what are some other ways we can use our influence and our voice to do stuff. And so the thinking for this December meeting is, so the council started this discussion. At the end of the day, I think there were 80 people. The council was clearly committed. We need to do something about the fact that our schools across both sectors appear not to be doing what's necessary to make sure kids are learning how to decode. And dyslexics, and by dyslexic, I mean, I think it's fair to say dyslexia is sort of the term for the kids for whom it's very hard to learn how to decode. I mean, at some level, they're pretty similar. And but how to go forward was very unclear. DCPS at that moment didn't really come forward with, here's what we would like to do. And so council wants to do something, but what? And so part of the idea here is to bring people in who can sort of talk especially about the training piece of it. Because whatever the council does, that's so much a piece of this, is how do you give teachers what they need in order to do what they need to do, whether it's the whole class instruction known as Tier 1 or the interventions, Tier 2, Tier 3. And then we can try to assemble what we've learned into materials that we could send to the council that maybe would be helpful to them. Because I do think, and I often say this when we talk to people over there, in other states, you know, you've got a state legislature that's worrying about education policy, you've got a city council that's appropriating, you've got a state school board, you've got a local school board, you've got a lot of operations, a lot of hands-on research technical capacity. We don't have that as much here. So this is, and so the council has this issue. It doesn't have the resources, I don't think, to go at it the way it might. And this is a way that we can be a little bit value added.
This is for
the December meeting.
I highly recommend that we get Dr. Robin Barr to come talk to us. She testified at the council. She also works for Washington Literacy Center. She's amazing. I can connect you if you would like.
Yeah, let's talk.
Do you want me to also talk about homeless?
Yes, and let me just say one. So that's a December meeting, and then thinking forward. And I'm putting this out partly so everybody can sort of be thinking about it as well. Is sort of future conversations, future meetings, and you know we talked about sort of going on the budget, maybe January, February, I think, and then I think one that really sort of tries to deal with the star rating, the measurement, how we do that, the report card. So maybe that would be the other January, February, and an opportunity to sort of hear from the community now that we've had 2 years worth of report cards. It would be after we hear this initial report from OSSI about going forward. So think about.
On the dyslexia piece and the December meeting, OSSI has out for 60-day comments a notice of proposed rulemaking on Chapter 30 special education regulations. So if board members have not seen that, it's in the last LEA look forward. Comments are due by December the 7th, I think. I'm sorry, January 7th. And if you haven't taken a look at them, you should, because they're enormously important for students with disabilities, and they do govern things like the use of RTI and how students are identified with any sort of disability, but including any sort of specific learning disability, dyslexia, etc. So I hope folks have taken a look at that.
We'll send that out.
It might be something we think about in questions as we ask questions of our panelists in December.
Is that Brandon Todd's legislation?
So it originated as Brandon Todd's legislation, which was a pilot around a few things, and I think everybody agrees. Everybody who testified, as well as the council chairs who sponsored it, that it shouldn't be a pilot. We're well beyond that. Things
Was
that
it
can
about, and it was all about dyslexia.
Yes,
Because
it was
his
about
legis-
screening, it
His
was,
legislation, the title was dyslexia and other reading disabilities, which got sort of torn apart in the names.
yeah, I would say that it's as I said, it's about dyslexia and the reading disabilities that you would describe as decoding problems. It's not the whole broad set of.
Good. And homeless students.
Yes. So the other panel that we'll be having at the public meeting in December relates to the barriers that are faced by homeless students. We are inviting a number of experts, both in the field and in research, to talk about what those barriers are and what programs are available for homeless students in the district. The Interagency Council on Homelessness, that is operated out of the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services offices, is hopefully going to be able to testify on the broader programs, as well as the state programs based at OSSI and other entities in the district. We're still identifying individual people, but we have some really great leads from American Youth Policy Forum, into providers like Schoolhouse Connection. Is that right?
Have you thought about any of the nonprofits working with, like, Right Beginning, CFLS, yeah.
All on the list. We're reaching out to some of them as well.
Is there going to be a student testifying?
Probably not, if only because I'm not sure how to necessarily identify a homeless student. But I can ask some of the providers if any
What
of
about
those
a parent?
Or former students who experience homelessness.
What about a parent?
I will happily entertain any options on how to contact those folks.
You might want to reach out to Homeless Playtime Project. They might have a few.
I think that's actually on our list, and
And I know
will make sure.
Jack used to be on their board.
We did a lot of work.
Have these
advocating
people
for that
already
channel.
been invited for either one of those panels?
We have started to reach out in the last 24 hours.
Only because it just seems to be, it would seem to me to be a lot for one meeting to have both a dyslexia panel and a homelessness.
Our hope is to have 4 witnesses for each
Got it.
talk, so 1 panel per.
Got it.
AC Lab is doing research for an initiative actually on shuttles, shelters.
That would be really interesting too. At the very least, I mean, we certainly want to contact a wide net and have folks give information, even if they're not here for testimony, because we think both of these issues are things that State Board needs to be educated on and make sure that you guys know what they are.
And so the broad theme is just dyslexia, and then barriers homeless children face.
Sure.
And the dyslexia, I'll say, it's very focused on the teacher education piece. It's not every piece of it is that. We may want to do others in the future, but that's the focus of this.
Education. So like how
In service,
how to
in service.
educate.
What do people need to know, but how might you provide it in this bi-sector system? You've got people who are already teaching, you've got other people coming in. How do you make some massive investment in that? I mean, I think if I was on the
I do
council,
think
that's
it
what I
would
would
be
do.
helpful to just frame the issue, because I'm not sure we're all starting at the same understanding.
As
We'll
to the broad policy question or the.
Or just the
dyslexia.
dyslexia.
Knowledge, yeah, okay.
We will do that as well through additional materials
Got
through the meeting.
I
Go
was
ahead.
gonna say, the audience will know when somebody.
That the ombudsman's office perhaps is
The
part of
office.
the conversation.
They are.
about especially the RTI fund, since that was one of their recommendations.
They are involved in the conversation. The Office of the Student Advocate is also very involved in the homeless.
Which is where the homeless idea, the
Right, came out of that.
came out of
Came out
that
of
discussion.
So they will be part of that discussion.
Fantastic, thank you.
Ruth, if you don't mind, I did actually have one other thing on scheduling that I forgot to mention earlier. So for speaking of the retreat that we were talking about earlier, the date is the more than majority of board members have selected January 22nd at 9 a.m. to noon. So please mark that on your calendar. I will send an invite, but that will be the date of our retreat, January 22nd from 9 to noon.
But if you want to bring a present, that's the day I joined the Army in 1960.
Speaking of anniversaries, this is the actual day anniversary. 1 year ago, Fraser became a state board member.
I saw it on my Facebook, on my Facebook. What memories there. Come up here. The nice photos.
Oh yeah, no, Ryan was sharing all.
Yeah.
Oh, Ryan.
Ryan was sharing all.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the other Fraser.
All right, so I apologize. January
22nd, you said.
9 to noon.
Yes, and we will send a meeting invite from this year calendar. So,
Is it morning or afternoon, you know?
9 to noon. Did you want to go through committee reports?
Yeah, I mean, it's late, I don't know if people have, I would say this is discretionary, people can report or not report. And then we'll start with, the committee of the day, the chairman of the day.
Right, we had a really good meeting today, I think. It was very interesting. It was really good reports by all kinds of different people. And Mendelson, Bob White was there for a little bit, but Mendelson and Grosso were there. They asked good questions. And it seemed to me that they were very, very enthusiastic about working to get teachers to stay in school, basically. Thank you very much. And I'm here today because I was supposed to be in Colorado.
In Denver.
Denver.
Yeah.
But Alex is in Denver.
He's
I guess
currently on a flight back.
he's on his way home now.
He's in for 24 hours.
There was a teacher retention conference.
And then tomorrow I leave for Denver for 24 hours.
Oh, that's right.
Plus,
You guys are tag
For
I
educational
really
questions.
hope you're not on that frontier flight.
I am on.
Teamwork makes
Have
the
fun.
dream work.
Okay, that's the end of the teacher retention committee.
Great,
No, wait.
by the way,
Great op-ed.
we should be doing more work on getting those op-eds out on the stuff that we're doing, and that really can help.
Yeah, and just
Oh, good.
very much kudos to Malaya for working on
Yeah,
that.
Well, I did it.
and also the whole, the tweets that we had today, coming into tonight, and
For those that
what do you call it with the, what is it?
So for those that didn't see the tweet storm that Malaya did and Caitlin did yesterday, with the 10 things you should know about teacher retention, we're also turning that into a handout to have for EdFest.
That's great.
Oh, that's great.
What are you calling it? What
What am I talking about?
I
There's
don't know.
the visuals there.
Infographics.
Oh, an infographic.
And I know
Sorry, I
this
really
is,
didn't, I should know that word.
but I know this was said before, but I do want
Mark it
to,
up.
no, I was just gonna say, I know this was said before, but I do want to reiterate that just getting this hearing, right, took 2 iterations of this board and 2 long years of advocacy and hard work on behalf of, again, 2 iterations of the board, but also many staff members, both current and former. And so I want to thank everyone, especially the staff, for your hard work on advancing this issue, and for Fraser for representing the board during our day in the sun today. So thank you.
Dr.
Dr. O'Leary.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Dr.
So-
And wait, while we're doing that, can I also say, I still remember going back a number of meetings, and it was new for us, and I remember John Paul defending the idea of having a teacher turnover session, and we did it, and it was great. And I don't know if you were here, we were congratulating the previous board, the current board, everybody who had work to do.
Great.
this time.
Sorry,
I'm
I
done.
do have actually an update for the well-rounded education, which they don't necessarily know yet. The statement of work is on the street as of yesterday at 3:15
It's for the standards piece.
for the standards piece of the work, which is fantastic.
Won't he do it?
So, what we are going to do to help expand the word about the statement of work, we will be tweeting from the State Board's account on Monday, letting vendors know that they can now go to OCP's site and fill out all the information and apply for this. Individual board members are strongly encouraged, as in do not send this to anyone.
I'm strongly disagree.
Do not. The
But can we
State
send
Board,
you, but we can send you
No.
like,
absolutely not.
Because that will give a
We
conflict of
cannot
interest.
have any preferentials for this. The state board will talk about the fact that this statement of work has been issued by the state board, and individual vendors can go to OCP's site.
But can I talk about the research in general?
You can talk about the research in general, but I would strongly urge you not to do anything that would potentially create conflicts
but
with
we can
individual vendors.
retweet your stuff.
You can retweet ours, but I would urge you not to, and let us do this from the official account only.
It just doesn't exist.
And maybe we could do this at the retreat. It would be helpful to know what are some of the metrics that they use to determine a vendor. I would
So,
imagine
I
the
think-
dollar amount is probably a large factor, but
I think that's a great idea, and luckily our president will be sitting through Introduction to Government Contracting, which is a 4-hour course. If anyone wants to, if any other members want to sit through the course,
when is that?
it is offered once a month. It is a really interesting course.
When is that?
December 17th is the next one. That one is full. But if you are interested, let me know, and I will send you information.
Well, I would only go if I can go with Ruth, so if I can't go with Ruth.
But we can certainly have a conversation about the procurement system. It is challenging. It is not designed for research. It is designed for services and goods for business or for the government, and to get that at the lowest cost possible to the taxpayer. So that is what it is designed to do, and it is very focused on that.
I'm just laughing because this building was built by the lowest bidder.
Doesn't it make you feel safe?
Anyway, so
We should get back.
that is still exciting news. So we should have a vendor in place by early next year to start that work, and which is really, really exciting.
And then when that is identified, then we can close the loop with DCS.
We will talk about all of those things at the next well-rounded education committee meeting, I'm sure. Jessica, did you have?
Am I ready?
You are ready.
Great. Social